We'll get back to that in just a minute, but joining us now on Score North Live, you read his work at rotoworld.com, NBC Sports. He's on Twitter at ThorKU. It is Thor Nystrom. Thor, thanks for a few minutes. How are you doing this afternoon?
Absolutely, gentlemen. I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. What was your overall takeaway? I saw that you sort of congregated grades from around the league, so to speak, of people who grade NFL drafts, and the overall takeaway is that the Vikings did pretty well over the weekend in terms of making themselves a better football team.
Yeah, I I graded the Vikings an A+, and I live in Minneapolis, and doing this for a living. I've been a Vikings fan all my life. I grew up in Brainerd, and every year when I put together my draft grades, I sort of have to guard against my biases, as far as that goes. And on draft night, I grade on a curve, and so I give out two A+, I give two Fs, every time, and the rest of my grades are sort of sprinkled, along the spectrum from there. And on Saturday night, the Vikings were one of my A+, and I was just thinking, like, am I being too nice with the Vikings? But I just thought they slayed it throughout. And then there's this dude in Germany that aggregates overnight on Saturday night. Every year he aggregates, the two early grades from, around, so it'll be like Kuiper and Vinny Iyer and Easterling and some of these different guys, and he'll just toss them together. And I get in there. I'm lucky enough to get in there every year as well. And when it came out on Sunday morning, I saw that the Vikings were indeed the number one class. And so I knew that, the rest of the industry was seeing it the exact same way that I was. So it's a good day to be a Vikings fan for sure. They absolutely destroyed the draft process. Kudos to Spielman and the rest of the crew.
Well, which part of it impressed you the most? I mean, was it the fact that they were able to stay patient and not give up additional assets to move up to get someone like Ezra Cleveland, or that they sort of had Justin Jefferson fall in their lap? What was the thing that stuck out to you the most when giving them the grade?
Top to bottom, almost top to bottom. I mean, literally almost everything. It was a coup almost everywhere you look. First of all, Justin Jefferson never should have been there, at 22. Doing this with all the different mock draft iterations, especially in the sort of time we're in with the pandemic stuff, everyone who has my job did like 50 of these things over the past couple months. There was no exercises in which Justin Jefferson was available at 22. Every single time, the latest he fell was to the Eagles at 20.
Yep.
And so the fact he was available at 22, that was a bonanza. Then Jeff Gladney, like if he would have been available to where the Vikings originally picked in their second slot, that would have been a bonanza. The fact that you can drop to 31 and get two free extra picks and pick him up, that's crazy. And it required things like the Raiders reaching for Arnett, the Packers getting crazy with Love, the Seahawks reaching for a third round player and Jordan Brooks at the end of the first round. It required some wonky things to happen, but it facilitated this coup. And then you go later on to the next round, the Vikings get, in my opinion, what was a first round player in Ezra Cleveland. I had him as the 28th overall player at 58. Not only that, a tremendous scheme fit at a position of need. Ezra Cleveland was one of the premier zone tackles in this class, a guy who was a 91st percentile spark athlete. And I do a 500 player big board where I comp all 500 guys. I comp them to a current NFL player. I don't know if you guys saw who my comp was for Ezra Cleveland, Mr. Brian O'Neill.
Yep.
How convenient that Ezra Cleveland, ends up with the Vikings. And then, you just go down, and I'm sure we're going to talk about some of the other guys, but I just thought it was steal after steal after steal after steal. And it just happened to be mostly in positions of need. And not only that, but tremendous scheme fits. Not only that, but they picked up a couple, future picks for next year. And again, addressed their positions of need. And they'd lost a lot of guys, veterans and stuff like that. And they happened to get this really big class as well. So I just thought they did a tremendous job top to bottom.
I think a lot of Vikings fans, talking with Thor Nystrom of Roto World and NBC Sports here, a lot of Vikings fans, Thor, were looking for the Vikings to be dramatically improved in 2020 through this draft, something that I would caution them against. And I still think that in the afterglow of the draft, and a lot of Vikings fans like yourself, very happy with what they did, expecting great and immediate impact from at least the first 4 or 5 guys taken. How NFL ready would you say, let's just focus on the first 3 rounds, the guys that they took in rounds 1 through 3 are in terms of coming in and helping them right off the bat?
Jefferson immediately. Jefferson's going to be a starter. He's going to catch a lot of balls immediately, and you saw that at LSU last year, well, and the year before. I think people think that Jefferson's game just sort of shot up last year, kind of like Burrow and Edwards-Helaire and stuff like that. That's not actually true. If you look at his 2018, his market share was ridiculously high as well. It's just that they had that sort of run first, sort of ethos from it was still the vestiges of the Les Miles offense. But Jefferson that year, if you look at their number 2 receiver, he had like 28 catches that year. And so Jefferson had like double or more the catches of the number 2 receiver in 2018 as well. And that's when he was playing on the outside. Last year, obviously, they moved him into slot because they had a Bolitnikoff winner on the outside in Jamar Chase, and they had a 5-star on the other side as well. And Jefferson just dominated out there. Now, I don't know exactly what the Vikings are planning to do as far as like Thielen and stuff, with the slot stuff. I would advocate, keeping Jefferson inside probably, just because he dominated so much in the slot. And it just seems like he's going to be just a fabulous, fabulous, fabulous NFL slot. But I think, the good thing is that Thielen's already shown that he can do both. Jefferson's already proven that he can do both because he was really good on the outside. And I think underratedly so in 2018 at LSU in what was an extremely vanilla type offense. And like I said, his market share in that offense was really, really high. But he's going to be able to come in and produce immediately. Gladney as well. I think you're probably talking about a day one starter. He's a guy that fits Zimmer really well. People have talked about this. He's just a really feisty kid. He's a little bit smaller. He's an under 6 foot corner, but he plays bigger than that. He's a guy that comes up. He fills against the run. He was really active. In terms of his havoc stats, his TFL numbers were always high at TCU. They sent him on the blitz. And his pressure rate in terms of like getting home on the blitz was always really high, sack numbers and stuff like that. And he's really sticky in coverage. He's a guy with really good movement skills and stuff like that. Now his game regressed just slightly last year, and I think the reason for that was TCU's defense regressed a little bit. I'm not really concerned about that at all. Gladney was like one of the nation's best corners in 2018 by every metric, like the advanced numbers, everything like that. And certainly in this class was one of the best corners in the class and probably shouldn't have been available at 31. Like I said, I just think that was a coup. So I think, as far as those two guys, I think that you're getting immediate starters. Ezra Cleveland, that one is more interesting. I don't know if he's going to be an immediate starter. Now, like I said, I comped him to Brian O'Neill, and I'm also going to cop to a mistake that I made as an evaluator a couple years ago, which is I thought the Vikings made a mistake when they took Brian O'Neill. I thought Brian O'Neill was a couple years away. I thought he was a total project, and he came in and started right away and was awesome. And Ezra Cleveland, I think he might take a little time as well, but the Vikings are so well at identifying linemen of this ilk that fit their system. And Ezra Cleveland is such a perfect glove fit for this system. And they took him about right around where they took Brian O'Neill. And like I said, in terms of his body, in terms of his athletic profile, in terms of his game, he just about is the perfect amalgam for Brian O'Neill. So potentially you could have the thing where you kick Reef inside, you played, Cleveland, whether it be left, right, you could kick O'Neill to the other side. I've heard people talk about moving Cleveland inside. I don't love that personally, having watched his game. The thing that Cleveland really struggles with is power, like really, really struggles with. He to the point where he could not be taken by a non-zone team. He's kind of finessey in that, but he's never going to be beaten by movement. He's a tremendous, tremendous athlete, which is why it was so cool that he got picked by the Vikes, by his zone team. He's going to be able to pick, get to any target that you need him to, in the zone blocking scheme. So I just think that he's like a great fit as far as that goes. But like inside, I don't like that fit as much. I'd rather have Reef inside, just talking about next year if they were going to do that. The other option, of course, is just to let Cleveland sort of marinate on the bench for a year as he sort of continues to build up his mass and stuff like that. But he already is 311. So, and the other thing that I tell people is Cleveland's been starting for a long time at Boise State, and he is jumping up in competition. But Boise State, of course, is one of the best G5 programs in the nation, and he played plenty of top competition there. I mean, it was in the Mountain West, sure, but it's Boise State. They were in plenty of bowl games, and they played some high level competition. And he was one of the best pass blockers in the G5 and really in the nation, going back, several years now. So he could potentially play right away too. And by the way, Cam Dantzler, I think could too. So I do think that they got several guys that could come in and play and or start right away.
How about the day 3 guys? I mean, they took 74 of them, and I was on every single conference call yesterday, which was a long day. But tell me the one guy from day 3 who could surprise us. Every year it seems like the Vikings have one. Last year it was BC Johnson, a 7th-round draft pick, who ends up as their number 2 receiver when Thielen was hurt. Who's that guy this year?
My favorite one is Troy Dye from Oregon, one of the nation's best coverage linebackers over not just last year, not just the year before, but you go back like 3-4 years. He was a 4-year starter at Oregon, and I think that he is and was criminally underrated throughout the draft process and really throughout his career at Oregon. And it was kind of weird that he was, because he was always like on the all Pac-12 teams and everything like that. And I think the reason was because I would think about this a lot. Like, why don't people like Troy Dye? Because it was even in college, like it felt like he was underrated. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. I think number one, it was because he played in the Pac-12. Those guys just tend to get underrated as is. And I think the other thing, it's just the old school football thing. Like the old, the big slobber knocker linebackers, like Jordan Brooks, he's like a big hitter guy, and he puts up like a lot of the tackle stats, and like you see him in the highlights, and he like knocks people's chin straps like through their foreheads and stuff like that. It's easier to fall in love with those guys, or even like Malik Harrison, like guys like that, big hitter types. But like Troy Dye, he's not that type of linebacker. He's a finesse linebacker. He's like a converted safety, and what his special sauce is in coverage. That's just what he does. And as far as like, in terms of the run game, he doesn't really take on blockers, and he's more sort of like a lasso type tackler. And so I think like scouts, they don't love him as much, because it's like, he's not as physical as they like or whatever. But I don't really care, because he still gets people on the ground. And what I care about is in the passing game, because that's where the NFL is going. And this guy is someone who can actually nullify tight ends and running backs, and specifically tight ends. That's what I'm concerned about. And he can also help out with slot receivers as well. Like I said, converted safety. He's a guy who's 6'3", 231, and he has solid length and quasi safety athleticism. We didn't get to see it at the combine because he didn't test. But I think if he had been able to test, his stock may have gone up. Because I think he would have tested really well, maybe to the point where he got into day 2. But we just didn't get to see that as much. And there was some of these, perceptions about his game of, he's not as physical and stuff like this. And it allowed him to fall down a little bit. But I just tell people, man, the NFL is a passing game. What you want out of your linebackers, it's not the old school type stuff. You want guys that can run around and cover people. And if you look at Troy Dye's advanced numbers like PFF, you look at it, both in the charting, but also like quarterback rating allowed and stuff like that. You go back 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. He's one of the best in the nation. Like, going past Isaiah Simmons, he's one of the top guys past that. So to get him in the 4th round, I find that to be highway robbery. I ranked him as the 82nd player in the class.
Got just a few minutes left, Thor. I'm sorry, Declan, I missed your hand signal there. What were you trying to tell me? One more question?
Yeah,
All right.
one more.
Thor, outside of the Vikings, give me one team's draft you hated and one team's draft that you love.
The worst drafting team in the NFL this year may have been the Packers, in that aggregated, and this isn't a bias thing. That was the aggregated thing I was talking about. They were the lowest. 2 other ones I'd give you, Patriots and Seahawks, did did a pretty poor job. And what was the other question?
One that you loved.
Another one that I loved. Let's see, what other one did I?
It's got to be somebody besides the Vikings, though, right?
Yeah, I thought the Giants did really well. I thought, the Buccaneers was my other A plus. Getting Tristan Wirfs at 13, they needed a tackle really bad, and obviously they're trying to win now. It was the one need they had. You had the 4 big tackles in this class. I didn't think a tackle was going to fall down to them, one of those top 4 guys. Tristan Wirfs is the guy that I thought was the best in the class. And so to get him specifically, but to get any of them, any of the top 4, I thought that was a coup. And then Antoine Winfield at 45. I mean, my gosh, I complimented Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger. And I think that Winfield's the best safety in the class. A lot of people thought it was Xavier McKinney. But McKinney tested poorly, and then Winfield tested better than a lot of people thought he would. I don't think people gave Winfield credit for the athleticism that he really had, because I think people would watch Winfield on tape and they'd be like, "Oh man, this guy processes so well. He's in places he shouldn't be because he's so smart." And it's like, well, yeah, he is. But you also have to give him credit for his athleticism as well. And he proved that in Indy, and to me proved that he was the top safety in the class. So to get him at 45, I thought that they killed the draft as well.